What it do, anime crew? Amen. Listen, I just watched No Country for Old Men. How good is it? Let's find out. So the movie starts with like a bunch of establishing shots, really introducing you to this world. The whole thing's shot like really wide, as many like more traditional Western films are, and it just shows you this terrible landscape. People always talk about like nature being a very fulfilling thing to connect with, and like holy shit, a desert is just such a barren, lifeless wasteland, which is something that I'm sure my dad would really resonate with based on the way he describes Las Vegas. But the point is that's a setting that obviously works really well for the messaging of this film. No Country for Old Men. It's very brutal. There was a point in the middle where I was just like, wow, I mean, barely any side characters have been introduced that aren't just crazy people or just like dangerous men with guns all driving around waiting for two of them to meet and kill each other. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just a pinball machine of people who might end up killing each other. You know, back when there was the police officer, not police officer, like the detective who was really cocky that met the guy at the hospital. And then, of course, Anton, and then the main character, and they're all running around. They all have guns. They're all, like, chasing each other in weird ways, and you're just waiting for something to pop off and go down, because people are dying all along the way. People aren't really making a big deal out of it. Just horrible stuff happening, you know? The drug war, drug trafficking, right then and there under everybody's noses, and it's just something that happens. And one of the main themes of this movie is definitely the inherent chaos of this world and like lack of control. I mean, you see a villain like Anton, who I'll talk about in a little bit more depth later, and then you see a character such as the main one who just literally by pure luck happened to have stumbled upon an unimaginable fortune and uses it to try to change his life. Just pure chaos, pure coincidence. There's absolutely nothing to it, no rhyme or reason, except for the fact that he was somebody who was like inquisitive enough to go after it, and the only reason he was is because he was so jaded and desensitized to seeing a bunch of like dead people in a drug trade gone wrong that he was willing to just like pursue it anyway. It was almost like when you see the desert landscape and you see this guy sort of shifting through all of these dead people's bodies and taking their guns and taking their money and all that stuff. It's like it evokes like a symbol of like a vulture, you know, like he's scavenging and living off of the dead bodies of random other people, just being concerned with himself. You know, a vulture obviously doesn't give a shit about whether the thing's dead or not, except if it means he can eat it. And he's not like a cartoonishly evil protagonist or anything like that, but he's definitely just an opportunist who is just living in the world and is trying to make it work for himself as much as possible. He's not a overly selfless person. He's not a overly ideologically possessed person. He's honestly a pretty simple guy who just happens to fall into this fortune, right? And then there's Anton, and I've seen a lot of clips. Everybody's seen a lot of clips of Anton, and what I thought was he was like a very pure force of nature style villain who's just like purely a psychopath who represents some sort of like equalizing force in the world or some sort of fundamental evil, and that is what his character boils down to. But I actually don't think that's true after watching the movie. I think that's kind of what he wants people to think. Like, he's obviously, you know, gets off on the control of like having somebody's life in his hands, even though it's not really his hand, it's still by the flip of a coin. He definitely puts himself in those situations constantly, and clearly somewhat enjoys killing people, as he's chosen this as his lifestyle, despite clearly not being overly possessed by the money. But he's not a total indiscriminate serial killer. He takes jobs, he has a incentive, you know, he's a hitman basically. And it's interesting because he's so intentional about everything. Like, he tracks this guy down He's like an absolute genius and he has no hobbies. He does nothing but lock in on his target and then do everything possible in his power to track them down. But then once he does, he has this like weird ideologically possessed obsession with like flipping a coin and random chance deciding whether they live or die, which, is definitely a really interesting facet of, we talk about this, or I talked about this being like a Western. I don't actually know exactly what defines a Western because most of them take place in an earlier time period to this, but this is in a Western setting. It is a high stakes, gritty, like action thriller where people shoot each other. I don't know what else a Western is. But I'm sure there's more to it than that. But what I always found really interesting about the Wild West and just really bizarre and compelling, I guess, is that people would genuinely so readily just settle something in a shootout. And don't get me wrong, like a shootout requires skill, a duel requires skill, but there's a tremendous amount of luck involved in that. And people just like threw up their lives like they were poker chips or something, like they were just something to wager, just to like settle like at times even like petty disagreements. And I'm sure a lot of that is overly emphasized for the sake of entertainment, and it wasn't actually totally like that. But I mean, you hear about so many of these like old Wild West legends, and it's like, oh, he killed 30 men in duels. It's like, Jesus Christ. I'm sure it's amplified, but like that's such a bizarre cultural custom to just fight to the death, particularly in a way that has so many elements of chance and so little margin for mistake. Like it's been a thing in probably tons of cultures throughout all of time to fight to the death for stuff. I mean, like some animals do it for mates, but a shootout is just such a delicate thing to put your life to hang your life in the balance of. It's unbelievable to me. I can't even fathom it. So I've always found that interesting, and I definitely think it's a kind of a representation of that when he flips the coin. But when he flips the coin, it's hard to say because his personality is so like obsessive and almost like perfectionistic, but at the same time he's like obsessed with this idea of like the fucking, I don't know, the balance of the universe and pure fate, pure chance. He seems to be like visibly upset when the guy says he just happened to have married into something, basically, that it wasn't earned. It's just like we are all just a product of a million other pieces moving around us, and what happens. So you've been playing, you've been flipping a coin your whole life. You just didn't know it, because it's like, every moment that goes by, you could find $1 million. You could die in a random car accident. There are many things. And it's weird because he has like a God complex, which is kind of corny to say. And he enacts it on people by putting himself into situations where he can hang other people's lives in the balance of his whims, and he flips the coin, right? But at the same time, like the main message of this story is basically that like a hotshot, egotistical young man is not long for this world, because you'll realize that there's so many people, there's so many factions, there's so much money and power involved that if just one person gets involved in it, it doesn't matter how competent he is, it doesn't matter how lucky he is, he's fucked, Like we're all very bit players in a much larger game. And it's sort of like as people get older, they sort of realize, they look back, become more observant and see like a more societal like scale change in the world, and they see all of this stuff happening. If you're like a police officer, or you were in the military, for example, you'll see so much death, and you just kind of have to throw your hands up and say, you know what, I can't control this. This series follows a lot of people who are like in law enforcement and stuff like that, and I feel like part of the personality type that might gravitate towards that is somebody who really wants to have control and influence in the world, and try to establish order and all that stuff. There's probably more uncharitable traits you could attribute to wanting to be in law enforcement, I'm sure, but it's just sort of like it's this like sheriff's journey to realizing how little control he has over everything. And Anton sort of represents that, but in a way that like he's harnessing it. He wants people to believe he is this like force of nature, ideologically possessed man who like kills merely on chance, but really he enjoys it. He wants everything to be as intentional as humanly possible and as calculated as possible. He does nothing but, sit there and study and think and scheme and all that stuff. But ultimately, he's just as vulnerable as anybody else, and it almost seems like a coping mechanism that he has such a fixation and obsession with chance, because you would think with somebody with the personality type like him, fucking absolutely obsessive. He felt utterly offended at the notion of his boss hiring multiple people to get on the case because he's so perfect at what he does. He's just extremely like egotistical in a way that's like you could definitely define him as a force of nature style villain, but I really think that's what he wants to come off as, and he's like yes, in some sense he represents the indifferent and random cruelty of the world and how it's impossible to change and how so often it goes unpunished, but also he is like the perfect person. He's so intentional about everything, and he's so egotistical, and he thinks so highly of himself, and he loves to look down on other people. But there's always random chance. There's always random bullshit that could get in his way, that might get in his way. He gets hit by a car randomly some point later, and he rolls with the punches. But I feel like there are a few points in the movie where you can tell it's genuinely like pissing him off. I think he genuinely has a great, on some level, resentment for the randomness of the universe. And maybe it's because of that strong emotion that he wants to harness and manifest it and force that pain onto other people. I'm sure he's already psychopathic. It's clearly not about the money or anything like that. He's not total indiscriminate killer. He chose the career path for a reason, though. Definitely really compelling. I'll be excited to talk to my friend a little bit more about him later. And that's probably most of what I have to say. That's kind of what I was thinking about throughout the runtime of the movie. There's obviously a lot of really great shots. This color palette is depressing, bro. Like it really did just put into perspective for me how dead and barren the Wild West is. For the first few minutes of the movie, I was seriously really zoning in on the fact that I'm like, wow, there are no like side characters here. There's no pleasantry happening. Everybody's like in like a kill or be killed scenario, or it's just like establishing shots of lifeless wasteland, or it's dead people who were in a place gone wrong. It's just miserable, and then it's dangerous guys following around each other with a gun, waiting for somebody to, win a duel or win a shootout, or somebody to die, and then a few of them die, and then by the end of the movie, Anton lives. He moves on to, roll the dice another day, engage in another duel, and that's sort of life for him. You know what I mean? It's like it's No Country for Old Men, and I guess I want to circle it back to end this to the metaphor of like dueling in old times, in the sense that an old man realizes that he can't be the one to change anything. He doesn't have the moxie of a ignorant, naive young man who just wants to like throw himself at the world. But at the same time, it's a country for people who are willing to take chances, who are willing to harness the randomness of it and the chaos and risk their life to get involved in these crazy businesses and with these high up people. And in that sense, a lot of those people probably never lived to be old men. Anton probably never lived to be an old man, even though he's the perfect example of somebody who's such an expert in everything. It's because of the fact that he is still in this business of crime. He is still putting his will against the will of other powerful men. One day the cards are just going to run out for him. He got shot in this movie, almost taken out by some random guy, some nobody, really. And then later he gets hit by a car and his bone's sticking out of his arm. We don't even know if he really makes it out of that one. The implication is kind of that it is. It's sort of like supposed to be a unsatisfying thematic exclamation point on his mark that he eventually does go unpunished, and that there is clearly no sense of justice in this universe. But at the same time, I can't imagine that guy's such a mastermind that he's going to be living forever. You know what I mean? It's No Country for Old Men, because if it's your country, if you really want to play the game and you really want to get involved, probably won't make it to be old.